Hello and welcome back, and that is right, today it's time for another Should You Buy, and today we're looking at this. This is the QNAP TBS-h574TX. Catchy name, right? This is their new 5x NVMe Thunderbolt and 10GB equipped system, and although right now I'm still in the process of doing the full hardware and software review for this, which is taking its sweet old time, I thought while I've got it here in the studio, what we'll do is our quick 5x5. In this video I'm going to give you 5 reasons why the 574TX, by the way I'm not going to say its full name all the time, should be the right NAS solution for you, your business, your editing, your whatever, but I'm also going to give you 5 reasons why you might want to sit on the fence, wait a little bit longer, or go for something completely different. So let's crack on with number 1.
Phenomenal cosmic powers!
Now, I go into way more detail on this in the full review when that goes live, but I'll tell you right now, the fact that this system rocks out the gate with E1S drives is a real big deal. The use of M.2 NVMe's in the world of network attached storage has been growing year on year, and the usability and viability of faster access times, both in terms of read and write performance in Gen 3 and Gen 4 drives, is something we've seen NAS providers move not just for cache, but move towards using as primary storage pools. And the zenith, the overall evolution of that kind of storage in this environment, in a 24/7 network attached storage environment, is this. Why is that? Well, a couple of reasons. Number 1, you can take advantage of pre-made E1S M.2 NVMe level drives. That is, drives that are built on architecture of PCIe, which give you performance in the thousands of megabytes, but resolve a disadvantage that the majority of these drives have had for a long time. Hot swapping. That's right. The majority of M.2 NVMe's, by the way, majority, I mean like 99%, if you try to hot swap an M.2 NVMe, that is to say that if a drive is showing issues or you want to remove it and then pop in a brand new one, it will make the system fail, because it's PCIe level. That can crash the whole system, and also can be incredibly detrimental to the system as a whole. Whereas E1S drives allow hot swapping just like hard drives. So when your drive fails, or you need to introduce a newer, larger drive, you want to have a hot swap drive or whatever, E1S drives allow you to do so. But moreover from that, the QNAP system here, the 574TX, this allows you to use existing M.2 NVMe. So you can go ahead, if you wish, take an existing M.2 NVMe, pop it inside. You don't even need a screwdriver, and that's it. That drive is good to go, thereby giving you the capacity of M.2 NVMe's in those larger scales, double-sided drives as well, up to 9.5mm height. But on top of that, the option to have hot swapping at your disposal.
Phenomenal cosmic powers!
I covered this a little in the introduction, but I'll tell you right now, the fact that this rather small system not only rocks out the gate with Thunderbolt 4 USB Type-C on both the front and on the back, but also rocking out the gate with 10GB, and also rocking out the gate with an Intel 13th Gen i5 processor on board, is insanity. This is probably the most up-to-date hardware system that QNAP have ever released. And again, look at the scale of the thing. It's so modest, and we'll talk about that more later on. But each of those individual Thunderbolt ports, if you populate this with even mainstream Gen 3 SSDs, you can get performance numbers. This is QNAP's own reported numbers of their own benchmarks in a RAID 0 environment, utilizing 5 Samsung 980 Pro SSDs. They reported speeds, I'm just reading my notes, of 1,637 sequential read over 1,736 sequential write. And if you have 2 active connected users simultaneously to that same RAID 0 pool, you can get up to combined 3,082 megabytes per second sequential read and 2,876 sequential write for 2 connected Thunderbolt users, making this the highest performing Thunderbolt NAS QNAP have ever released. And remember, that's just using the Thunderbolt ports. That's not counting an extra little 10GB for another connection there on the rear. So again, a huge amount of bandwidth open to you on this rather modest spec system, which again, those numbers couldn't be possible without M.2 NVMe's.
Phenomenal cosmic powers!
And again, I sort of touched on this earlier, but the compact nature of this thing, given those high performance numbers, given the capability of this, is genuinely incredible. This thing is very, very small indeed, but it doesn't stop there. This system has 3 internal cooling fans. We've got 2 fans there on the rear, and those are 2 little minor 40mm fans. And on the base level there, we have an additional CPU fan that runs all the way along the base with an almost entirely covered heat dissipation heatsink there on the base, working to dissipate the heat generated from that 13th gen CPU there that I just mentioned, a mobile SoC component, remember, by the way, so not the fully fledged i5 13th gen you get in a desktop system. But on top of that, cooling systems running all the way through over each of those M.2 NVMe's result in this system being remarkably compact, given the huge amount of potential and hardware inside. On top of that, it arrives with a nice, modest, and incredibly compact 120 watt PSU. It is an incredibly light PSU at that. So what I'm saying is this is not only a very small system, but a hugely portable one. And if you are a mobile editor, if you're editing on the fly, if you are working on location with a lot of your photo videoing assets and you need direct access to on the fly editing, this is something you're going to be able to set up really quickly, not have to be reliant on network connectivity. Just get on site, pop it down, connect 2 Thunderbolt editors, hell, a point-to-point 10GBE editor, a rather modest 120 watt PSU there, and boom, you're good to go to network, to share, and to edit that data live.
Phenomenal cosmic powers!
A nice shrewd little bit of marketing on QNAP's part, other than the retail packaging on this looking so Mac it almost hurts, is the fact that this system rocks out the gate not only with the ability to pop in all those SSDs, but on top of that you get 1 terabyte, that's 1 TB of free cloud space included as well. Now, you only get it for a year, but again, buying this device and getting a free terabyte of cloud storage for your off-site backup, for your off-site access, and that's QNAP My QNAP Cloud 1 storage as well, is pretty darn good. And obviously they're doing that to market the product towards photo video editors, those that are just looking at the whole connect my Mac, run Final Cut or Photoshop, get the job done, I don't want to learn about terabytes and gigabytes. I've got to say, it's a very smart move because it is genuinely appealing. None of their other solutions rock out the gate with a terabyte of cloud storage included with it, and ultimately making this even more desirable to the photo and video editors out there.
Phenomenal cosmic powers!
Just in case you're unaware, when you buy a QNAP NAS solution, just like any NAS solution from any of the brands that we talk about here on the channel, you're not just buying hardware, you are buying combined hardware and software, and this system arrives with the choice of either QuTS or QTS. QuTS is their ZFS, zettabyte file system, NAS operating system, and the ext4 version is that QTS version. A lot of the things they have in common are to do with a lot of the applications and services, the fact that you are accessing an entire operating system comparable to Windows or Mac OS via your web browser, or via the client tools, or via a mobile app, or via any system really, along with tailored tools specific to photos, video, music, VMs, backups, you name it, there's an app for it, with AI-powered photo recognition, metadata scraping for your multimedia files there, and multi-tiered, multi-site backup options as well, to later back up to another NAS, back up to the cloud, back up to that 1 TB of storage. These go down to the file folder level, all the way through to iSCSI LUN targeted storage as well. You've also got their surveillance platform, QVR Pro and QVR Elite. Then you've got things like their box safe application that allows you to migrate and synchronize data natively with Microsoft Office 365 and Google Workspace. Then on top of those VM tools, you've got the container applications as well. Then when you dig a little bit deeper, you can find out more about, thanks to its support of ZFS, you take advantage of things such as RAID Z, triple parity RAIDs there, improved cache options built into the ZFS file system that are just not available elsewhere, RAID resilvering, and on top of that, much higher performance overall And if you go for the EXT version, you got things such as taking advantage of 8 camera licenses in QVR Pro, take advantage of a whole length and breadth of third-party applications as well. Ultimately, you're not just buying the hardware, you're buying a complete software platform that is included with huge ranges of applications and services for Mac, for Windows, for Linux, but also for mobile devices and within the system itself, all rolled in. As good as all that sounds though, we have to be realistic. This isn't going to be for everyone, and it's actually quite a niche product outside of traditional storage systems that we've talked about. So alongside those 5 good reasons to go for this, I think we need to touch on 5 reasons why you might want to give it a miss. This first point genuinely baffled me for a while. So much so that prior to this video, I had to reach out to QNAP. If you're watching this, Craig, if you're watching this, Tam, hi. Because I genuinely was wound up by it, and that is that the M.2 NVMe's on this system, the slots that you're going to be utilising are Gen 3 times 2. That means that the drives you're putting inside here have a maximum bandwidth to play with of 2000 megabytes per second. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, that's absolutely loads. 2000 megs, if I was using a hard drive, it'd be tiny. But that CPU supports up to Gen 4 SSDs. Gen 4 provides up to 2000 megs per lane, whereas Gen 3 provides only 1000. This is a lot of technical jargon, but ultimately what it means is, if I use this SSD, which is a WD Black SN850, which by the way is the drive they used for their own benchmarks on their site that I mentioned earlier on, I will not get the speeds this promises. This promises speeds of 7000 megs. Unfortunately, or 7 gigabytes, what I will actually get is something like 15 to maybe 1800 megs, which is a huge downgrade for this. If I go for Gen 3 SSDs, these are the drives that we're testing in our review. And again, these are NAS related drives from WD. These are WD Red SN700. These are Gen 3 times 4 drives, capable of 3400 megs. Again, these will be cycled down, because although this is Gen 3, they're Gen 3 times 2, which means these will be cycled down considerably to around 12 to 1500 megabytes per second, because that performance provided on this was Gen 3 times 4. So Gen 3 times 2, we've got to halve it. And again, that cycles down to other SSDs that we can put inside this device. Now, again, after reaching out to QNAP, the predominant argument back was that this system and that CPU only has a finite number of lanes afforded to it, and those lanes have to be spread across those Thunderbolt ports in order to have 2 of them there. To add 10 GB each, to add each of those individual bays there, 5 M.2 NVMe's, there's only a finite number of lanes. And even if we were utilising PCIe switches inside to sort of half bifurcate the available lanes to you, it still wouldn't be enough. All you'd be doing is switching them down, which is clearly what they've done, going from rather than Gen 4, but into Gen 3 times 2 lanes there. Ultimately, the reason they did it can be explained, and to remain within this architecture, it can be explained. But there's absolutely no avoiding that those that are thinking of looking at this system using a Gen 4 a PCIe Gen 4 equipped CPU in a 5 NVMe system with Thunderbolt just need to be slightly aware and to factor in the considerations what the overall maximum potential performance of individual drives in this is going to be. And actually, while we're on the subject of maximums, one of the things I found, again, just a weird bit of baffling about those specifications there, was that the i5 model of this device arrives with 16 gig of memory maximum. Now, I kind of get it. I get it not only because when you go and shrink things down this low and you have to be very, let's say, tactical about the hardware afforded and the chipset and the PCIe lanes afforded to the CPU and blah, 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 blah. All that stuff. I get it that going for pre-soldered memory can make sense. But this system has a CPU that supports up to 64 gig of memory. And this system has got fixed at 16 gig there. Some users are just going to be a little disappointed that that's the maximum, particularly when you look at the full range of services that are afforded to zettabyte file system equipped devices, they normally need at least 16 gig to take advantage of the full extent of inline deduplication, inline compression, inline compaction, even some of the added QNAP stuff here like QSAL, that anti-wear leveling that ensures that the SSDs inside are not all hitting the same wear points. You can be a little bit more selective about drives that may wear out first over others. Nonetheless, 16 gig is a weird amount of memory for this to arrive out the gate with. Now, maybe it's a limited channel thing. Maybe. But nonetheless, 16 gig when you look at other devices in the 874 series, and we'll touch on more on that later, or even the 7.2 series that came before it, that would rock out the gate with 32 gig, and in some cases even 64 gig. 16 gig is not a lot for a system with this much going on at once. And that is doubled down further when you look at the i3 version of this device with a lower price tag, but a fixed 12 gig of memory. What the hell is that? 12 gig? That's an odd number for memory. Overall, I just wish they either put a higher amount of memory pre-soldered or gave the option via a SODIMM to increase it. But without knowing any technical hurdles that might have, been factored and caused by, we can't really comment on that second one. That gosh darn price tag. Let's be honest, there are users out there watching this that are looking at the, again, around $1,800 to maybe $2,000, $2,100 pounds nick or whatever you want to call it for this device, and are going to be like, that's a lot of change. Because it's right, that's a lot of money for this to be going for. And I get it, it's Thunderbolt equipped, it's 10GBE. There is also a counter argument when we look at the rest of Thunderbolt solutions from QNAP, who are still pretty much the only brand out there producing Thunderbolt NAS solutions. That price tag is actually within the remit of QNAP solutions, actually quite a standard pricing. And although it might seem a lot outside of that bubble, if you're only looking at Thunderbolt NAS solutions, that price is going to be kind of what you're stuck with paying. But that does also lead to another question. If you're looking at this and you've got about $2,000 or so to play with, why would you not go for the TBS-h674? That is a 6-bay NAS solution. It's got 6 traditional hard drive bays, 3.5 inch again, which means you could lump in 22 TB drives if you like. On top of that, it can arrive in an i3 or i5 configuration, which has more cores, by the way. It's a previous generation, it's not a 13th, but it's still got them. But on top of that, it's got multiple PCIe Gen 4 upgrade slots. It also has 2 PCIe Gen 4x4 M.2 NVMe's, which would allow us to take advantage of those wider speeds that we talked about earlier on. Ultimately, what I'm saying is that price tag, although it is within the remit of existing Thunderbolt NAS solutions, it in itself asks the question, why not go for a 2-tier solution like the H674T rather than this? I get it. If you're locked in on those M.2 NVMe options there, I get it, and there is 10GB on this, well, that system doesn't. But nonetheless, there is a question out there for whether that price tag raises more questions than it should. This one is more going to be to the interest of those that have been following NAS solutions like the TBS NASbook series from QNAP or their Silent NAS series, but it has to be highlighted, this is not a Silent NAS. It arrives with 5 M.2 NVMe bays, again E1S drives, or you use them with standard M.2 NVMe's and use the adapters that are included inside. Because of those 2 rear fans, because of that CPU fan, because of the metal surrounding that this solution has for the aid of heat dissipation, the result is this system isn't silent. And although generally at high use, because those M.2 NVMe slots are ×2 and therefore performance and therefore heat generation is subdued, it's still not going to be a quiet, silent system. And if you're going to be in close proximity to it, although it's not going to be banging and anywhere near as noisy as the 74T series I mentioned, it isn't silent. And I think a lot of users are going to assume it's silent when it is not. Of course, Deadbolt. Whenever we talk about QNAP, we always have to at least acknowledge that Deadbolt happened. I know there are users in the comments that have watched my previous videos within the last 6 months and say, will you stop banging on about Deadbolt? I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. Deadbolt, for those that aren't aware, QNAP was one of several brands that were successfully targeted by the Deadbolt ransomware group, and lots of users were affected, having effectively being locked out of their data and either having to resort to complicated means of data recovery or paying ransom demands via, I think it was 0.01 Bitcoin in order to get an access key to get their data back. And although it was, a year and a half ago now, coming up on 2 years in some cases, depending on the target threshold, there's still no denying it did happen. And although QNAP have made changes to their model, made changes to the defaults on their system, the security protocol, how apps are managed internally, the defaults of protocols when you set the device up, admin, default usage, stuff like that, SSH, Telnet and more, there's still no denying that users need to be aware that things like that happened. As I tell people, when it affected the TerraMaster NAS platform, when it affected the Acerstore NAS platform, and indeed, although we don't talk about it much anymore, when Synology were targeted by SinoLocker way back in 2012-13, we talked about it. And although that happened, Synology took their lumps and have learned from that. And they've not had, at least to date, a similar level of ransomware or malware attack as then. They tightened their platform excruciatingly at that point. And at least until maybe 4 to 5 years have passed, I'm always going to reference Deadbolt in a QNAP video. Nonetheless, as long as you stay on top of your updates, because QNAP did a really good job of redefining automatic updates for feature updates, security updates, or all updates to be installed automatically, and they tightened a lot of those apps and services, and it's a lot harder to put your QNAP in an unsafe state right now. And if you're not going to make remote access protocol accessible anyway, who cares? Still, nonetheless, I do think it's worth being in the loop on that, even if huge changes have been made. Nonetheless, this has been a should you buy on the TBS-h574TX. As I mentioned, a much longer and more detailed review is in the works right now. I just wanted to get the should you buy out there now. This is here with us right now, and I don't want to make you guys wait much longer. But thank you so much for watching. If you want to learn more, there's a link to both the full review, hopefully in the description, as well as the should you buy below, and buy links towards Amazon and a few other shops. If you are going to go to them anyway, why not use those links? It results in a small fee coming back to me and Eddie here at NAS Compares, just us, and it allows us to keep doing what we do. Otherwise, if you need free advice, use the free advice section over on NAS Compares, a big blue button on the right hand side of the page next to the NAS Finder. Alternatively, contact us on our Discord, ask.nascompares the forum, or use Ko-Fi, Coffee, whatever it's called, or Patreon to not only get expedited support but also join our membership tiers for early access to videos, our monthly Zooms, exclusive content polls, and more. And finally, if you do need additional support and help with your individual setup, you can use Zoom consultations there for me and Eddie. We can do some one-to-one, go through your setup and see if there's anything that could do with some tweaking, tuning, improvement, and fixes. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.